And welcome to the Journal Star Sportswriters podcast, our final one for hoops. I am sports editor Wes Huett, along with, as always, Adam Duvall.
Hello, hello.
And John Komosa.
How's it going?
Well, fellas, we had a couple basketball games in Peoria this past weekend. A few of them included our boys from Manual.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they went home with the fourth place trophy. Overall thoughts of the weekend, John? First, what comes to mind?
Yeah, Manual down there coming off a big win over Glenbard in the Super. Riding that momentum down there. Ran into a very tough East St. Louis team who ended up winning the Class 3A state championship over Bogan. So fought hard in that game. East St. Louis had a little bit of a lead. Manual pulled back. They had the lead at one point early in the game, kind of back and forth, and East St. Louis pulled away. Coach Coleman touched on that, during the teleconference, the week before or during the week of the tournament, and said that the key to that game was to contain Hargrove, which they had trouble doing.
Sure.
I mean, that's a very tough player, all-state player, big frame, long, and he just gave Manual some problems inside. And Pee Wee Brown finished with 24 in that game. Quintez Edwards was trying to get some buckets in there, but just a physical game and a hard game for Manual to kind of pull that one out. So
yeah, Hargrove. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say the key to that game was free throws for Manual.
Yeah,
and obviously the free throws, I think they've 15 for 33.
That's right.
Left 18 out there, so not what you want to do in any game, but especially not a semifinal state basketball game. So
yeah, and Hargrove had 19 and 12, and Storm Hanging did as well of a job as he could trying to defend Hargrove.
Mm-hmm.
But Hargrove's the type of guy where he's going to get a lot of his hoops on offensive putbacks or slash into the basket. He doesn't necessarily create his own shot. He's one of those gets it on drives and lay-ins, and that's hard to defend. And like I said, Hargrove's just a guy who just all over the place on the floor.
What do you attribute that maybe the shooting background or what for those missed free throws?
I don't know. John knows more about Manual. It feels like something that they struggle with
throughout the season. It's been a struggle for Manual with their free throws. Even in the Metamora game in the regional championship, Maurice Bird went 14 for 14, which was one of his best performances all year. But outside of him, I think Pee Wee went 0 for 5. Right. Had another guy, go 1 for 2. It's just, it's been kind of a bugaboo for him, free throws. And like I said, down the stretch, that's not something you can do, especially that many. You get put at the line that many times, and you just can't leave that many points out there. So
sometimes you just see kids just like rushing free throws. Just like getting the ball and just shooting. Like not taking your time, like taking a deep breath, maybe dribbling once or twice, spinning the ball, using your legs, and then shooting. I mean, it's like, okay, get it and go.
Yeah.
And, you saw that. I mean, that was ever so evident in Manual. I mean, it was just kind of some rushed shots. I know there's nerves. The shooting background is a lot different,
right?
But
and you wonder maybe if it was some legs too. I mean, they're not exactly the deepest team.
Yeah.
Most teams play a solid 6 or 7. Manual almost exclusively a 5. Yeah. They got some nice minutes for Ivory this weekend, but it just felt like they go with a pretty solid 5 with a couple of guys can spell here and there, foul trouble, and that could have come into play too.
I think Ivory's going to be a nice player.
He's got to get aggressive though.
Yeah. Get aggressive and be able to finish around the hoop.
Yeah.
When he starts, he's got a big body, but his defense will get better. Even over the next year, and he finishes at the rim, and that'll be a big thing for Manual, especially to have that big where they can work the ball inside too. So. So that was kind of my takeaway, and then Manual ended up playing for the third place game. Finished 4th down there at Carver. Ran into that Chicago DePaul College prep team that looked a lot better in their third place game, and kind of from the get-go was ran it up on Manual. Just had Perry Cohen, I believe he's a Brown commit, all-stater. They were pushing the ball in transition. They were hitting a lot of threes, and it just kind of got Manual down early and just rolled with it from there. So
yeah, but those third place games are always tough. I don't think it necessarily and the outcome of those games doesn't necessarily just dictate who the best team is. Maybe it's the most prepared team.
Yeah.
DePaul was very, very well prepared. Out rebounded Manual like 11. Outplayed him almost every turn. Again, and it's tough. I mean, if you come down and give East St. Louis a run like Manual did, and they're like, well, if we hit some free throws, maybe we win that game. And now they're disappointed.
Right.
Even though they were kind of a Cinderella to even be at State, when you get here and you see that you can play with East St. Louis and you lose, kind of hard to come out the next morning and play for third. I don't know how kids do it, to be honest. Those, I'm not a huge fan of consolation games. Like, I don't think they're competitive. At the same time, if I were a coach, I'd probably just play my bench and just let them have some time.
And
the old Bob Darling.
Willie did go to the bench. A lot of guys got a chance to play, which is is cool for them to experience that at State, and definitely gets them ready for that type of element. If they can make it again in the next few years. So that was nice just to be able to have that and get significant minutes in a game like that. So
and Willie did tell sideline reporter Piper Shaw at halftime that kids stayed up all night playing video games and he wasn't happy with it.
The nerves.
Oh my gosh.
Probably the excitement.
Yeah, Willie said some pointed things in the news conference that surprised me a little bit. He was saying some things how he's just disappointed with the effort, and I think he might have said some things he regretted at first, because it felt like halfway through the news conference it kind of felt like, oh my God, well, what did I just say here? We're ashamed of ourselves, ashamed of the city, and things like that. And he finally came around. I think what he landed on, what I liked, what he said was all the little things and the little work ethic things and the small things that they did to get to State, they stopped doing. And I think that's what was kind of a nice poignant thought there. Whereas it had a lot of ups and downs throughout especially the start of the season, with the tough schedule and just finding different lineups. And they finally found what they were looking for to get to State. And then when they got there, it's like, oh, here we are, and we're going to miss for free throws, and we're not going to be prepared, and it's just like, it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, and one thing that stood out for me as far as the players is it's such a hard game, especially, I mean, you lose in the semi game, that's tough. You didn't have that shot of playing for a state title, but you lose, you get fourth, and guys could be hanging their heads, and that's our season. But I did like that Pee Wee said and Myrie said that this is going to push them to work even that much harder for next year. You kind of get that mindset installed early, and get that drive, because they're only losing Quintez Edwards from last year, or for this year's team. So definitely you like to see that motivation push to get back on track and work that much harder. Like you said, the little things kind of sort that out. So
especially Pee Wee against East St. Louis. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where he took the rebound and went coast to coast.
Oh yeah.
They had a hard time guarding him, and that was it just ultimately it comes back to the free throws. Yep. But yeah, no, I was impressed with what I saw for stretches of Manual.
Sure. Yeah, they really felt like a team that, I mean, over the years I've covered prep, there's always this that where you feel like, oh, okay, this is a team that's ready to make a run to get to State. I felt like Manual was kind of at State a year early. I felt like, okay, we're gonna. So they kind of went out there kind of like a young deer getting his legs. Like there were a couple times where a couple of the birds and Hangen even himself were like didn't really know what to do on offense. Kind of felt a little bit lost. And I feel like with confidence and the flow of the program and the roles of these players coming into next year, that's huge. I mean, they're going to be. It's one thing to. I mean, they're going to go in next year into Pontiac, or next year in a game against Richwoods or something on a Tuesday night. It's like, we got this. We were State last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you bring up Pontiac. I think them going 0-2 at Pontiac and not maybe winning that first, or losing the first game, winning the second game, and being able to play again. I think that maybe The level at Pontiac, the teams there, that's not
incredible.
Curie, Simeon, even Bloomington when they still had Chris Payton.
Danville was there, weren't they?
Danville was there.
You have some.
Bennett was there.
A stacked schedule there, so you can come out of there with a win at all.
Right.
It's
even if you go 1-3 and play, the other 3 games relatively close.
Yeah.
You're going into the postseason saying to yourself, okay, we played against rated 4A teams. We played them close, and we even won. So I think maybe you think to next year, and you look at Pontiac, and if Manual gets a win or 2 there, I think that maybe help kind of springboard them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, I just think one thing you see of good basketball teams, as we spoke here before, is about roles, and these kids can settle into their roles. Obviously, they'll have trouble replacing Quintez, but knowing Manuel, I'm sure the lower levels have some talent to fill in. But like I said, we saw a couple of guys that they popped in there from the bench look nice, and I really like I said, I felt like they were a little tentative shooting at times, didn't want to be aggressive on offense, aside from Edwards and Brown. And I think I will say their defense, though, really impressed me. There were times, but I think some of the stuff that the positives on defense were kind of outweighed a little bit with the deficiencies on offense. And if you tip those scales a little bit next year, it could really
imagine that Manual team with Adam Miller.
Boy.
I mean, you think about that with Tolliver. I mean, he was an impressive sophomore. Even you think about the young talent on the team, and you add Adam Miller. I can't imagine. I really can't imagine as far as.
Well, I think we'd be celebrating a state championship.
Yeah,
I think. Adam Miller, if Quintez Edwards is the third best player on the team,
right?
Yeah, that's a. Well, we are. Before we get on to, we're going to talk a little bit about next year as well. But before we do that, recap a little bit of the 3A, 4A overall. We'll go around the horn here and give us some of the top moments or top players from the weekend. Something that stood out. Adam, you worked with the IHSA over the weekend, so you were there as well.
I got to see all of those. But I think what stood out to me the most was in the 4A title game, Evanston versus Belleville West. Evanston got up by 12 at one point, and E.J. Liddell took over bringing the ball up. Took over facilitating, creating his own shot, and sure enough, it was 8 right before halftime. They got a bucket to cut it within 6 right before, scored right after halftime, and the momentum was just right in their favor. But I think that was the biggest thing. And I said to myself, I was like, oh, why are they having him bring up the ball? Well, you're guaranteed the best player in the state is going to touch the ball every time down the floor. So that really kind of stood out to me. I mean, and the defensive effort that they put on Blake Peters of Evanston. He was coming off a sensational, I think, 27 points on 8 or 9 shots in the semifinal when they scored 94 points.
Right.
And the defensive effort that Belleville West put on Blake Peters and Evanston was very impressive. I just gave you a what-if scenario about Adam Miller. I guess the rumor in the offseason was that Terrence Hargrove was going to transfer to Belleville West because Hargrove and E.J. Liddell play on the same AAU team. And so if the Mark Chambers, that coach, didn't kind of work out, and that was talked about a lot in the press conference about how Hargrove buying into Chambers' system ultimately was beneficial to the program as a whole.
Sure.
Because, your leader, your best players on board, everybody's going to look to him and say, hey, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, for those of you out there who think only Chicago deals with the transfer problem, that's not
Belleville
the case.
West had 2 transfers from Cahokia. 2 starters.
I think another thing that stood out too is Will Shumpert's performance late in the fourth quarter in that game.
Cahokia transfer.
Not playing in the state, sitting there baseline. How many dunks backdoor that he had is just impressive.
I think he had 8 of there was like an 11-point run or 11-2 run. Or something. He had 8 of them himself.
It was a great game throughout, and then then Belleville, that momentum obviously shifted. So, yeah, my takeaway from it. I honestly, I mean, Adam already touched on 4A, and that was a great game too. The 3A title game was, you know, equally as fun to watch. Yeah, late in that game, you know, East St. Louis is down 2 to Bogan in the fourth quarter. You know, what, 1.2 seconds on the clock, and they miss a free throw. And Richard Robinson, you know, it so happened so quick, and you go back and watch it. It's like, where's the box out? You know, he got right in.
He didn't even box him out.
He got right in and tip slammed it at the buzzer, and they forced overtime. And it just, like I said, it happened so quick, but you're almost like kind of shocked that he had that open of a putback look like that. And that was fun. And I mean, East St. Louis was down in that game. That you could just see that the momentum started to shift. They got that rally going and fought back into that game, and it was an exciting, you know, finish there at the end. And then overtime kind of pulled that one out. So that was a fun game to watch.
I agree with you. And when Hargrove and Bogan's, is it Agee?
Rashawn Agee.
Rashawn Agee.
I like him.
Yeah, they met at the rim.
Yeah.
And I think it was Hargrove who blocked Agee. You knew, you know, buckle up. This is going to be a great game.
And Hargrove finished with 32 in the title, I believe.
Yeah.
But Agee, I mean, he that's a player. He had 24 and 14, and it's
fouled out.
And it's hard. Like I heard from O'Brien, it's like he's not getting a lot of looks.
I know.
He was one of the most impressive players.
Efficient player.
Yeah. I was very impressed with him all weekend.
Yeah, and I think I heard some. It's kind of amazing when you see these players down here, and then you hear that they either don't have a Division I offer, or the only offers they have are from lower Division I. And you're like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
These guys are amazing players, and I don't know if it's just falling under the radar, or the coaches aren't working the circuit, or what it is, but sometimes it's very confounding. I want to say I know we had a lot of hand-wringing over the Chicago domination in the small school ranks, and like I wanted to not tip the cat, no one really did it, just the way it shook out the 3A, 4A weekend, but I really liked the geographic representation that sort of played out. I mean, having teams, we had a team from Peoria, we had a couple from St. Louis who had both winning titles, we had some from Chicago, we had some from the suburbs, some from the city, and just felt like it was a nice mix of hoops across the state, which we've I think the move to 4-class, like it or love it, like it or not, whatever, it's irrelevant. What it has done has lowered that. Under the 2-class system, we had more geographic representation. I think that's apparent, whether that is good or bad or indifferent, whatever. But and the shift to 4 has allowed certain corridors of the state to send more teams than others. Chicago, even Peoria, seems to have a little nicer path in 3A than it had under the previous 2A window. And it was nice to see. So the crowd was pretty good. I thought it was a nice atmosphere. The 2 title games were terrific.
Oh yeah.
And you could argue that 4 or 5 of the best teams in the state were playing this weekend. Where in certain years you might not say that.
Tell me about sitting behind the student sections. How was that?
It was wild.
Yeah, they let the manual student section
get pretty close.
I think I felt a couple of Rams fans breathing on my neck.
There was a guy. There was a guy next to me. He was a photographer, and he didn't say it after the manual game, but he said it when I saw him later during the 4A game. And he said, "Man, I was almost going to say something." I said, "Say something about what?" And he said, "About them being so close." I said, "It was so late in the game that I'm just trying to get the play-by-play that I didn't even pay attention." But I had a hand on my back and just yelling at the refs, and the Curie fans were at it too, and they
Curie fans were there too.
This was during their game, but it was like he's like, which one was kind of the wildest between the two? And I was like, well, it's there's that line there, so you kind of have to. But I can understand frustration in games and stuff and being there, but yeah, it's definitely, you feel like you're right there in the crowd.
That's something that the IHSA did new this year, that they put the students behind the baskets. They used to have that corral type standing room thing, and they said, no, we're putting the students behind the basket. And I especially noticed the 3A, the East St. Louis, and Belleville West too. I mean, they're just right on top of you.
Yeah, I'm all for behind the baskets, but I could have used them a couple feet back behind me. Well, for one, at one point during Manuel's semifinal, I was writing a little inside baseball here for people. The way it goes is we start to write our story before the game ends. So, unfortunately, I'm writing about Manuel losing the game before the game, because they're down like 12. And I have Manuel fans literally looking over my shoulder like, you think we're going to lose? And I'm like, don't look at my work while I haven't published it yet. It's like, but I have to get it written so I can get it up immediately when the game's over.
It's almost like starting a tweet and you can see it, but I have to get it out right when it's over. It's no disrespect, but I can quickly delete that and work up another one. That's why you get 2 drafts saved, but I'm going to go with the draft. I got to pull up one that's got to go right away.
Right, so absolutely.
Yeah, 2 in the docket.
That's right. All right, well, let's take a way too early look at next year. We'll also throw in some girls talk here. Adam, sounds like a couple of the same teams from this year and also bring some back.
I would say that Morton, they returned 4 of their 5 starters from the state championship game. And that doesn't include Maddie Becker, who should probably be back in January, maybe healthy and ready to go by the postseason. And she started all 32 of the games until 30 seconds into the sectional semifinal, where she tore her knee up. But yeah, I mean, obviously Tinley Dowell is a humongous loss for them. Right. But the core of Lindsay Dullard and Courtney Jones and Katie Krupa and Peyton Deering and what they have coming off the bench, I mean, I'm not saying crown them, but
it'll be. I'm really interested to see. I got to watch Morton play at least a game and a little bit in fits and starts, but it'll be interesting to see what type of player Katie Krupa grows into. Obviously, she played a lot of posts this year, but I'm wondering if as her game develops, if she can add a little more of a floor game, like Tinley, because Tinley, as a younger player, also played more posts.
Right.
And then so it'll be interesting to see if she works more backcourt into her game.
If she can develop that high-low game where she can pop out to the elbow and hit that, or hit a 12-foot baseline jumper, maybe develop into a kind of an oversized 3, handle the ball a little bit. Yeah, I mean that's a high major player with her size.
I agree. Yeah,
because she finishes already through contact, and she can make free throws and rebounds and defends well, and I mean a day or 2 after they won, I had kind of a mini feature on Katie, and she went up against 4 successive All-Staters in the sectional title, super, semi, and
handled them.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that she was just a freshman. Right. So I mean, Bradley has offered her, but that's the first of many more.
Right, I agree.
And then on the small school side, Lewistown, I fully expect them to be. I mean, that core of juniors is so good. Greg Bennett loses, I think, 2 contributing seniors. I mean, their style of play, their ability to score inside and out and press and defend. I mean, that's just the recipe for success at the 1A level.
Right. How about over on the boys' side?
We'll start with the big school. 2 teams in there that we saw battle it out in the sectional championship. In the Big 12, I like Notre Dame and Manual both next year. Manual, like I said, that's a year too early for that state team. Right. They'll be even better next year. Only losing Quintez Edwards, but they have other guys like Myrese Bird who will be back, who can handle the ball, who's been their guard, and Tolliver's a year better. Pee Wee Brown as a senior is he's only getting better. And then Notre Dame, they're going to lose Joe Gustafson, Ben Corey, and Matt Pudick, who are, solid 3-year varsity players. Their 3 best defenders, obviously. But they'll have Connor Dillon back, All-Stater, honorable mention. His brother, Declan Dillon. They'll have Noah Reynolds, who is big for them, and he'll be back because he missed earlier in the year with that groin injury. But now he once he started getting in the lineup, he really took over for scoring with them. And then his brother Nelson Reynolds, he was on the JV dress for varsity, didn't get playing time, but he was a very good player on the JV, arguably one of their best. So they'll have him kind of in the mix. So Notre Dame and Manual, 2 teams to watch for next year.
How about for the smalls? You mentioned Quest.
Small side. I do like Quest next year because they got to the regional championship, battled it out with Tremont, ended up losing in that game late, just a couple, Tremont got some buckets at the end there. And but Quest has a very balanced team. They're going to have a lot of kids, back as seniors next year. They had a really good junior team. So Dustin Brooks, I kind of like them going on a run next year. They got a good team. So.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Look for all area packages are going to start rolling out next week, Tuesday and Wednesday for small school girls and large school girls. Be
26th and 27th.
27th, and April 2nd and 3rd will be the two boys packages. Mm-hmm. No spoilers, but you can probably make educated guesses as to our players of the year. But come out for those, and all spring sports will be heating up here.
I'm sorry, I'm watching Bradley in the background.
Bradley's, for those of you, if you're not watching, Bradley's only down 50-48 with 11:40. So I got distracted there in the last minute of this podcast. So I'll have to.
It's about preps.
Yeah.
No. All right.
So
pay attention to pjstar.com/preps, hashtag PGS Preps on Twitter, and then we'll be having some baseball, softball, track, all those good things, previews coming up this weekend, the next weekend, somewhere around there.
Absolutely. Thanks for being our host, Wes.
Of course, fellas. For Adam Duvall and John Komosa, I'm Wes Huett saying bye for now.
Bye.